Hi guys, Olive here. Here today with a special guest. This is my husband, Tony.
Hey.
You may have met him in a previous video that we did back in September of last year where we talked about a book that you had reviewed for Open Letters Monthly, back when that was a thing. Now it's Open Letters Review, but Tony's review is still out there. It was on a book called Significant Zero, all about the video games industry, which is an area of expertise for Tony. However, he has been playing video games less recently and been more focused on reading, which you were interested in doing quite a few years ago. So can you tell us how you made the transition from being mainly a gamer back into reading, and specifically how you've been getting into nonfiction recently, which I'm very proud that you are.
Basically, I was getting bored of the games coming out, or I would just find myself playing a handful of 1 or 2 games here and there, multiplayer stuff with other people. And I just wasn't playing stuff as much anymore. So I got a little bored. And one of the things I really meant to get into was podcasts, at least more of them. And so one of them I stumbled across was named Stuff You Should Know, which is a podcast. It's these 2 guys, and every week they just pick a random topic. They research it. And they're not experts by any means, but they just kind of talk very casually about it. And it's really interesting. It's about 45 minutes to an hour for each one. And from there, I just started to gain a natural interest in other stuff that I wanted to learn about.
Yeah, because you didn't go into it I want to read more nonfiction. I feel like it should be more a part of my reading. It was more of a natural progression, right?
Yeah, I would say that. And I've always meant to read more nonfiction. I mainly read sci-fi and fantasy and fiction just in general. And I would say, I think, looking back, one of the reasons why I got into a slump is because I just read fiction all the time. The nonfiction I was reading earlier on in my life was kind of here and there. I mean, it wasn't really anything extensive, and I didn't really keep to it. It was maybe a book here and there that came out every year that I had an interest in. The one I can really think of that I started but didn't finish is Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything.
I talked about that recently.
Yeah, I still have it. And it's funny because I'm actually reading another Bill Bryson book right now, In a Sunburned Country, I think it's called. It's his travel memoir about Australia, which is great. It's fantastic so far. Yeah, I really didn't read all that much beforehand, and not really diversifying my reading tastes kind of led to stagnation and just me not kind of wanting to read anymore.
And then you got distracted by games and stuff. That just became a bigger priority for you, I feel like.
Yeah, it did.
You never stopped being a reader. You just became more interested in games for a period. Mm-hmm. I always knew you would come back to it.
Yeah, I did too. It was just one of those things where I was just every time I thought about reading something, I'm just I can just do it tomorrow, and then I never would.
Well, I think that also has something to do with the fact that you weren't excited about the reading that you were doing.
Yeah, I did this thing where, and I think thanks to you, I've become more comfortable with not finishing something if I'm not really enjoying it.
It takes a long time for a lot of people.
I remember quite a few books I would read where I'm just I absolutely hate this. But if I stop now, I will feel guilty. I've come this far, sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah, seriously.
That was a huge thing.
I do like to take a little bit of credit when it comes to you getting into nonfiction, but I know I didn't have a ton to do with it. I think it was something that was gonna happen anyway.
It came organically.
I think so too.
I remember the last 2 nonfiction books I read before I kind of really got into it was The Informant.
What other nonfiction did you read back in the day?
The main one was trying to read Homicide: Life on the Street.
Oh yeah, David Simon.
Yeah, that was when you and I just got through the wire, and I think I was craving something else like that, and kind of just going through David Simon's back catalog of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think I got maybe a quarter of the way through it, and it was just very dense.
And dark.
Very dense and dark.
You're a mood reader.
And the thing is I tend to like dense and dark stuff, but
you need to be in the mood for it.
Yeah,
you are a much bigger mood reader than I am.
Yeah, I'll read something and I can be enjoying it, but if I'm not in the mood, I'll lose interest. I'll come back to it when I'm in the mood for it, and then I just rip through it.
Yeah. You've done that so many times. But I try to pay attention to the fact that you are such a big mood reader. When you were super in the Mad Men zone, I was now is the right time for you to read Revolutionary Road.
And I loved it.
You were just in the right headspace for it. And that's I think we both have learned that is your style. And I don't even know if I would have known the term mood reader had it not been for BookTube.
When I go downstairs to pick something else to read, I'm not so much thinking, something specific, I'm just like, what am I in the mood for? And I just kind of scan.
But I think we've been applying your mood reading to your nonfiction reading as well. And I think that's been part of why it's been so effective, because you'll come home sometimes and be like, I've been listening to this podcast on North Korea or this subject matter. Like, you tell me about all these little things. And I'm like, I've heard about a book for that, because I have a database brain. Mm-hmm. And so I'm able to recommend them to you. And also you can come here and peruse the shelf that's right behind you.
Yeah, that is very convenient.
Yeah.
I have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah. But I thought this was good that we could talk about how you're finding your way into nonfiction and sort of finding yourself becoming a nonfiction reader.
Yeah, it's just kind of happening.
Yeah, because I have been into nonfiction for like ever. So when people ask me, as they frequently do, since I am a big cheerleader for nonfiction here on BookTube, people will ask me, how do you start with nonfiction? How do you get into nonfiction? And I never really have an answer because I've been a nonfiction reader for like ever.
Yeah, it's just part of what you do.
Yeah. It's just part of my reading. So I thought that at this juncture, it would be really good to talk to you when it is organically happening to you, and maybe give people some ideas if they want to start introducing more nonfiction into their lives.
For me, the main thing I think was listening to podcasts first. And then on the back of that, I should say most, if not all, of the nonfiction I've read this year has been audiobooks. All of it.
A lot of people like nonfiction specifically on audio.
Yeah, and I can see why. It really just feels like an extended podcast.
Yeah.
And just going from podcast into that, it just felt really seamless.
Like an appetizer versus an entree kind
of
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
This is something that Steve Donahue, who is a better nonfiction reader than all of us combined, he mentions a lot that he thinks it's helpful to go on to Wikipedia, which will give you a short little burst of knowledge on any topic. So if you've naturally been drawn to, say, like ancient Egypt, and you find yourself reading a whole entry on Hatshepsut, who was the longest reigning female pharaoh in ancient Egypt, perhaps then you want to go on and read The Woman Who Would Be King by Cooney, which is a book that I read just recently, which gives you a whole in-depth history of Hatshepsut's reign and what is known about her, things that ancient Egypt accomplished under her reign. I think that's a really great way to get a little snippet and then use that, like I said, as an appetizer to then move on to read a whole book on that subject. I also think it's really important that you're reading nonfiction that isn't going to be boring. I don't mean to talk crap on nonfiction. I love nonfiction. Besides you, it's the love of my life. But sometimes it can be a little dry and academic, and if that's not what you're used to, it can be a little bit hard to stomach. But I think someone like Bill Bryson, for you, is a really good place to start to kind of show you what's possible. I also recommended The Power of Habit to you, which I've said many different times is my Swiss Army knife recommendation for anyone looking to get into nonfiction. It's one of the only generalized recommendations that I'll make because everyone's so different. But that one, oh my God, I love Charles Duhigg. I love the way he tells a story.
Yeah, every anecdote was easy to relate to and kind of grounded the concept.
Yeah.
That he was talking about really
He
well.
tells it like a story, like, hey, I know this person and they experienced this, and this is the science behind it. Starting with nonfiction authors like that, who are going to make it seem like a story, who are going to make it feel a little bit more like fiction. If you're more used to reading fiction, I find that's a really good way to pull yourself into nonfiction.
One book I particularly enjoyed this year is How Music Got Free by Stephen Witt. It was absolutely fantastic. It takes a look at piracy and how it evolved and how it affected the music industry. And then it also looks at the MP3 and where it came from.
Yeah.
And
how it almost didn't win the format war.
How it almost didn't win the format war. And this is just speaking to my personal interest here, but I'm a software engineer. And in the very beginning, they talk about the algorithm behind the MP3 and how it exploits
how humans
interpret acoustics.
Yeah. It's so cool.
And how they use that to compress audio data in such a way to make it really, really small, but to the point where you can still...
They don't have to play every individual thing because your ear doesn't hear every individual thing. Yeah,
you don't hear every single thing, so they know what to leave and what to include.
To make it smaller.
Yeah. I feel like I understood it from a big picture concept, and even that was just really cool. So if you have any interest in that as well, that's
another one that's told in just such an interesting
Oh my god, it was so good.
I know, right?
It was so good, man.
Oh, I listened to it all in one day. I remember very clearly I was trying to catch the bus, trying to get home that day, and I was running to catch it. Like, it skipped my stop. Shit! Running for the bus, but I had it playing in my ears the whole time. I'm like, this is just a nice workout while I'm listening to this book. I ain't even mad. And I think the reason why you and I connected to it a lot is because we lived through that time.
Yeah, I would say if you were, like a teenager in the late 90s, early 2000s, this book is right up your alley.
And listened to popular music at the time.
Yes.
That was the first nonfiction book I've ever read where I'm like, oh my God, I know what he's talking about.
I lived through all of this, man.
I lived through all of that, and especially because he was focusing on, like, how hip-hop music, how those CDs were ripped and put up online. I was like, I was listening to all of that music at this time. So he'd be like, Nelly released this single. I'm like, yeah, he did. I was listening to all of that.
It presents all of the sides, and you really get a grand sense of how out of their league the music industry was and how behind they were.
Well, I don't even think they had a chance, really.
No,
because this technology was in its infancy, and then it's picking up steam, and then there are people pirating things, and they didn't even know how to deal with it, and then they run these campaigns to try to crack down on it. They were cracking down on people who had no idea what they were doing. Just citizens who were like, I'm going to click this button, and they didn't know that they were stealing.
Yeah, I think in the book he describes it as people who weren't involved in the scene at all, the piracy scene, and
the people who didn't know enough to just hide themselves were the ones who got caught.
Random person on the block, installing LimeWire for the first time and downloading a Blink-182 song.
Oh my God, LimeWire.
Yeah,
been a long time since I've heard that term.
Morpheus, Kazaa.
Oh God, Kazaa. I think I told you this. I had a middle school teacher who pirated a lot of music and told us about it. I'm not quite sure why he did that.
Oh, he wanted to seem cool.
Yeah, he definitely did.
That's why.
Yeah, looking back, yeah, he definitely did. But yeah, he told us that he got in trouble for downloading music illegally. And that was around the exact same time.
Do you get fined?
Yeah. Yeah, he told us he had a lot of fines to pay. Why did he tell us all of this? All that to say, perhaps you should also find nonfiction that you can personally connect with. Whether it's a place you've traveled, or you're going to travel and you want to learn more about, or something connected to your family history. Anything that you feel personally invested in, you're going to read that story, and I feel like it's going to pull you in more. So I feel like that's another good recommendation. That's the reason why I recommended that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it goes without saying, but pick a subject that you want to know more about.
You feel like it goes without saying, but I feel like a lot of people want to read more nonfiction and just don't know where to start.
If you don't care about quantum physics, don't read about quantum physics.
I don't want to know about quantum
physics. If you don't care about trains, don't read about trains.
Trains are kind of cool, though.
They are kind of cool. I would like to read more about trains.
I don't have any books on those.
That's fine.
We could find some.
Cool.
Do you feel like there are any other methods that you're using right now to get more into nonfiction, or anything that you feel is pulling you more toward it? Obviously, exposure to nonfiction, which is happening because you're married to me.
Yeah.
But
I would say, with everything you're reading, try to make it almost a daisy chain of other things you're exploring. Like, you read one book about a certain topic that might spur interest in certain things. For instance, I read some books about North Korea, and in my ignorance, and this totally makes sense, I really didn't know anything about North Korea. I didn't know that North Korea was so tightly involved with the USSR. And part of the books I read talk about the famine of the 90s in North Korea, which I did not know about, and how that was tied to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So naturally, my interest is, I want to learn more about the collapse of the Soviet Union. I'm sure you'll be thrilled to hear about that. Yeah. So I would say, try to look for opportunities like that.
So try to find a way to make it snowball into other interests is basically
Yeah, always be on the lookout for nuggets of different subjects to look into from what you're reading versus having what you're reading be a one and done sort of deal. And I think also something else too is, for me, I mean, this is maybe not for everybody, but me personally, I read 2 books on North Korea back to back, and I'm sure it was because of the subject matter. I got burnt out. Absolutely burnt out because it was very heavy. It was very depressing. Try to diversify as much as you can.
Yeah, too much of one thing, I feel like, is going to be...
Yeah.
I have the same thing. Like, I was reading a lot of books on birds, which I love reading about birds. But I was like, for my own reasons and for the fact that I don't want every single book I talk about on this channel to be about birds.
Why?
I need to read a nonfiction book that isn't about birds.
No, you don't.
Stop! So that's really all we had to discuss in this video. I did want to seize the opportunity to have this discussion as I saw you naturally moving toward
Mm-hmm.
bringing nonfiction more into your reading life. Of course, it would have been more time appropriate in Nonfiction November, but I think by the time Nonfiction November rolls around, you're going to have nonfiction as a much bigger part of your reading life just naturally.
Yeah, I would agree.
Given how much I see you picking up nonfiction.
Yeah, it's not going to stop now. I've already added stuff to my Goodreads.
But thank you very much for coming on my channel and talking
Welcome.
about your experience with nonfiction.
Sure.
It's always nice having you on the 2 whole times that it's happened so far.
Yeah. See you guys next year.
If you have any comments or questions about anything that we've talked about in this video, or if you would like to share with either of us your experience about getting into nonfiction, or if you have any tips or tricks about how to get more into nonfiction, I'd love to hear it in the comment section below. Or you can find me on a variety of different places on social media. The links to all of my profiles are linked in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video without Tony.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.